White supremacy believes in taking both sides of every conversation, as Neely Fuller said. We already know about the events that took place in Virginia's gubernatorial election. The Democrats ignored the black vote, so black folks stayed home. And the Asians and Latinos, who the Democrats had been passing hate crime legislation for and are planning to give millions and millions of dollars to, they broke for the Republicans. But there's also another side. You got the bootlick media trying to get you happy about some black politicians winning office. First one that comes to mind is Eric Adams. I told you about this clown, Officer Eric Adams of the New York Police Department. Bastard hasn't worked for them in a long time, but he still calls himself a cop. He was a police captain. Yeah, you got him, Kamala Harris, Val Demings. Yeah, it seems the Democrats are very fond of Negroes who put on a badge and didn't do a dang thing to stop white supremacist thugs with badges. We're supposed to believe there's some sort of great accomplishment that Eric Adams has been elected mayor of New York. Doesn't matter if the guy's black or not. The question is, whose interest is he operating in? Now, of course, with the white media, they always like to flaunt in front of you whether or not they got some Negro bootlick on a leash or not. Adams did an interview with Joe Scarborough and Mika the Bigot Brzezinski. When it comes to me, believe it or not, I'm one of those people who actually watches certain news content with the volume off. It was something that I was taught a long time ago that basically if you want to understand what it is that you're seeing in the news, you should actually watch it with the volume off, because the only thing that they do with their commentary is try to dictate to you what you should believe and what you should think about what's clearly right in front of you. And when I turned off the volume and watched this grinning goon, who's the only thing more fake than his teeth is his sincerity, but I couldn't help but notice the books behind him. Saw one called Gotham, saw one about Obama, and then I saw the one with the biggest letters of all, in red that stood out the most, The Power Broker. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar, The Power Broker is the biography of Robert Moses. Robert Moses was a so-called urban planner in New York in the 20th century, and he was a man responsible for a lot of the highways and thoroughfares and a lot of the parks and such that have been designed. But this man was an out-and-out racist, just a white supremacist par excellence. In fact, he was so racist that Robert Caro, the man who wrote The Power Broker, he described Robert Moses as, quote, the most racist human being I had ever really encountered. And that's the guy who wrote Robert Moses' biography. The only reason people even know who Robert Moses is because Robert Caro chose to write a biography about the guy. And that's how Robert Caro described him, the most racist human being I had ever really encountered. He was the man most responsible for the idea of weaponizing infrastructure as a means to demolish black neighborhoods. And if you couldn't demolish them, at the very least, build these highways and do it in such a way that the black neighborhoods are cut off from the rest of the city. You use the highways as a way to segregate the black areas from everywhere else. Robert Moses and his weaponized infrastructure set a model for what the rest of the country would do. When you see things like the Dan Ryan Expressway in Chicago, where you got black Chicago on one side and white Chicago on the other, and they use that expressway as basically an impassable wall to separate the two, it was Robert Moses who pioneered that stuff. This is who they call an urban planner. They got a freaking statue of him up in New York City. Oh yeah, the white powers they be, they want to make it known this is a man who did what we wanted done. If you want an example of how psychopathically racist this scumbag was, History.com did a story about him, and they quoted him as making a speech in 1959 where he said, "Our categorical imperative is action to clear the slums. We can't let minorities dictate that this century-old chore will be put off another generation or finally abandoned. Clear the slums." Now, he didn't talk about what was going to be done to make sure that there's housing and employment for the people he's clearing out. Just clear the slum. We're taking out the trash. When I say that gentrification, all this stuff is ethnic cleansing American style, I'm not being hyperbolic. Robert Moses just told it to you in the clearest terms. This is who Eric Adams has a book of, and he wants the world to see his name associated with this guy. But he is infamous now, especially because of black people bringing to light what this guy is and the damage that he did. They don't like to talk about him much anymore, but Eric Adams, he has this guy's book right behind him, and please don't think that that's some sort of coincidence. This is Eric Adams sending a message to his white paymasters. Hey guys, I'm on the team. That war against black people, I'm going to be your foot soldier. I was your foot soldier when I was a thug in the NYPD, and when I told those niggers, you need to stop protesting these white cops killing you, you had it coming. Now he's making it clear he's going to be a foot soldier for them in City Hall in New York. What kind of mayor is he going to be? He's going to be a mayor in the mold of Robert Moses. Gentrification, which is nothing more than ethnic cleansing American style. Anti-black racism, there won't be a police shooting in the city that he won't cheerlead for. Oh yeah, that's the kind of mayor that Eric Adams is going to be. And you got MSNBC, those racist scumbags over there, beaming and strutting, and as far as they're concerned, how great this is, this guy got elected mayor. Because just like Obama, it's going to be a guy with the requisite amount of melanin who is going to be presiding over the wholesale slaughter of black folks in New York, and the ones that don't get killed are going to get run out of town. And he's going to be presiding over all of it and calling it progress. Ain't a damn thing progressive about this scumbag. What, am I supposed to believe that this piece of dirt He's able to read up on whatever propaganda the right wing gives him regarding police violence protests. But when it comes to Robert Moses, he doesn't know anything about the guy. What, he just got the book and never read it? He doesn't know anything about Robert Moses? No, this is him sending a message loud and clear. And by the way, while we're on the subject of Robert Moses, keep in mind, as with so many other white supremacists who are getting their historical reckoning as of late, there have been these pathetic attempts in recent years to rehabilitate Robert Moses. Of course, you have Bloomberg, owned by Mike the Bigot Bloomberg, his little propaganda outlet, saying that, well, it's more complex than that. Sure, he built bridges, deliberately built them so low that city buses, which usually have poor black folks as their passengers, he built those bridges so low to deliberately keep buses from being able to go to certain areas of the city. You build the bridges real low so only cars can get through. That's basically a kind of black tax. And sure, neighborhoods got demolished, but it was all done in the name of progress. And just to let you know that as far as they're concerned, you're never too young to be propagandized. They even made a comic book about this guy. I think it was done by some French people. This comic book portrays him as being one part bureaucrat, one part Batman. I wish I was making that up. They then also decide that they're going to start doing just flat out lies. They have a page in the book where apparently some black kids are playing in the harbor or something, and apparently they get killed by a tugboat. And Robert Moses, who, as far as he was concerned, all men are created equal. He had no enmity toward anyone. Well, he is outraged. The New York Times has a story. He says these children killed by a tugboat in the harbor on what they have to call a beach. Oh yeah, Robert Moses cared so much about black folks. He cared so much about black folks that he deliberately designed his roadways in such a way as to keep black folks out. Oh, but that's not what these white people boosting him were saying. You had one website sitting here saying that each project enriched life in the 5 boroughs, adding parks and public space, as well as giving easy access from one borough to the next. Yeah, unless you were a black person coming in which case the access was a hell of a lot harder. Adding parks and public space for white people, thank you very much. This is how emboldened they've become. The white supremacists, the white media, this is what they've decided they're going to try to dip their toes in the waters of and see if they can get away with it. On the one hand, you've got Bloomberg, who's trying to whitewash and downplay Robert Moses' historical urban racism. And on the other hand, you got some French freaks who decided they're going to make comic books that just deny it altogether. Why Robert Moses didn't have a racist bone in his entire body. It's one thing to try to whitewash and downplay some white supremacist anti-black racism, but in this case, they're trying to teach to children through comic books that Robert Moses wasn't a racist at all. Why, he absolutely cared about black people. Hell, if he ever saw a story about some black kids getting killed, he'd be dancing a doggone waltz. If anything, he'd be asking, so how do we make sure we corral more of those black kids there? We need to have more tugboat traffic go through that area. And a lot of other boats, too. That's what he would be doing if such a thing ever went down. He damn sure wouldn't have been trying to stop it. But this is Eric Adams' hero. This is who he wants people to see his name associated with. But Eric Adams is not the only one who the white media is stealthily hoping that they can get us to get happy about. Chantel Brown, who, again, Morning Joe and those clowns, there's just a sewer. I mean, if you want one-stop shopping for all of your bootlick identification needs, Morning Joe is the place to hold your nose and watch. But Chantel Brown, apparently she's won a seat in the House. For what, I don't know, but you had no less than Benny Thompson and Nigga Jim Clyburn, who were all happy that this brown woman had beaten Nina Turner in the primaries. She was the candidate that they wanted. These fossils who ain't done a dang thing for black folks. And tell black folks, y'all stop sloganizing, stop sloganizing. Sloganizing kills. Yeah, because the white supremacists with guns murdering black people, apparently they don't kill at all. But this is not to lionize Nina Turner, by the way. She hangs out with Bernie Sanders, and around here, we judge people by the company they keep. But you got the usual suspects in the white media who are trying to big this brown woman up. They talk about this as being some great win for black people. How? Chantel Brown ain't promised black folks a doggone thing. So how is this a win for black people? What if we won? Has she promised anything? She's taken any pledges? I think not. About the only place where I see something that might resemble at least less damage is in the case of the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. Now, this is one that the white media hasn't been talking about. Alvin Bragg is now going to be taking the same office that until recently was held by the odious bigot Cy Vance, who also decided that Harvey Weinstein wasn't worth prosecuting until the Me Too scandal blew up in the media. But now Alvin Bragg is going to become the first black district attorney in Manhattan. And I find it interesting because I've seen his name before, but whether or not this is a good thing or what have you, I'm afraid it's just too early to tell. And the reason why is we simply don't have enough information on a long enough timeline. And Mr. Bragg, regardless of whatever positive first impression some of you might want to have about him, the truth of the matter is he hasn't taken any real pledges, not to the black grassroots. He's made pledges on the campaign trail, but let's be bluntly honest, that don't make a saint out of a sinner. I don't know him well enough or have a long enough track record about him to say one thing or the other. But though, about the only thing that we can say in particular is that apparently, according to the New York Times, he is representing the family of Eric Garner in a judicial inquiry into the police regarding his murder. Now, of course, I think I've already made it clear what I think about Eric Garner's widow. She decided to throw him under the bus first chance that she got. So while I do want to see the murderers of Eric Garner put in prison, as far as his widow goes, the less said, the better. Though I do think it very interesting that now Mr. Bragg has taken the same office that was held by Cy Vance. And what that means is that Bragg is going to be inheriting the investigation into Donald Trump. Now, you would think the white media, as much attention as they've been giving to, Trump world, we got investigation into Trump world, New York's, Trump world, Manhattan DA's office. All of a sudden, they've fallen silent on it. They have not been conducting any interviews with Mr. Bragg. You haven't had CNN talking to him. You have not had MSNBC talking to him. They're just holding this man at arm's length for some reason. As far as they're concerned, DA's race, there's a DA's race going on in New York. We hadn't even heard. What? They're treating it like a local story. They're treating the election for the DA of Manhattan as a local story. Yeah, it was a national story up until this Bragg guy apparently looks like he's going to win. Then all of a sudden, DA's office is a local story. Nobody cares outside the borough of Manhattan. So I am, as far as Alvin Bragg goes, what do I think? To be bluntly honest, it's too soon to tell. I do take the white media's wanting to keep this guy's name mentioned to a minimum. I take that along with the fact that they are not even asking or even opining or surmising about what his election means for the investigation into Trump. They're not even talking to him asking, what about that Trump investigation? All of a sudden, they don't care about that. Who knows? Maybe they're looking at the situation and going, this guy could be bad for business. Or perhaps they're just looking and going, second verse, same as the first. Like I said, too soon to tell. But with the current crop of candidates and elections that have taken place in the last 24 hours, this is what would qualify as not a bright spot. There's no real bright spots here, but at least gloomy spot. Because basically, I'm not going to celebrate Officer Eric Adams, bootlick for the NYPD, becoming mayor. I'm not going to celebrate his hero, Robert Moses. Damn sure not going to celebrate Chantel Brown. And I shed no tears for Terry McAuliffe. Alvin Bragg, I'll give him a chance to prove himself, though I'm not holding my breath. And you shouldn't either. As I've been teaching you for years, elections are too important to be left to chance. The only candidate that you can actually have confidence in is the one that you put on the ballot. And no matter how virtuous they may seem, at least from a distance, if you weren't the one who chose that person, if you weren't the one who put them on the ballot, if you weren't the one who made sure you bankrolled their campaign so that you can control them after they take office, if they did not take a pledge to you, then what that means is they're not yours. They'll be there until they decide that they either want to climb the political ladder, in which case they're turning their back on you completely, or that maybe they think that there might be a post-political career in lobbying in their future, or that they're going to get some cushy corporate de facto pension. This is what happens to a lot of those black folks who wind up on the FCC, like James Clyburn's worthless little spawn, Mignon Clyburn. She was on the FCC, and now next thing you know, as I told you, she's on the board of a bunch of these corporations like Verizon and others. That's what happens whenever you've done dirt for them. They reward you with what amounts to a de facto corporate pension. Here's a cushy little job in corporate America. The only thing that Mignon Clyburn knows about a phone is how to dial one. Maybe. This woman knows nothing about telecommunications. So what the hell are you doing putting her on the board? That's how corporate America rewards the politicians who do their dirt. You can already smell the desperation on Eric Adams. All that skinning and grinning that piece of trash does. Oh, far as he's concerned, there's a U.S. Senate seat with his name on it. All he's got to do is kill enough black folks, or at least make sure to cover for the killings of black folks enough to go ahead and earn the confidence of the white powers that be. Though I got to tell you, old Officer Adams is up against some stiff competition. Chantel Brown's got some pretty sharp elbows, and from what I hear, she has absolutely no problem whatsoever grinding black people into the dirt. You can ask Nina Turner about that one. And somewhere in the putrid shadows of power, Val Demings is biding her time. I suspect that you're probably very disgusted by this, but we got to be realistic about the situation that we're in. It's not going to change unless and until we change it. You can't be looking around hoping that the next black person next to you is going to do something. This satanic parade of bootlicks and backstabbers is not going to be put to an end unless we put it to an end. Nobody's riding in for the rescue. Good news is we don't need anyone to. We got enough numbers, and all we need at this point is enough enthusiasm, and we can get the job done on our own. The black grassroots will not have come into our own until we can invade the spaces the white supremacy thought were theirs. When we show that we are able to successfully penetrate and invade spaces that they thought they had locked down. And the kind of talk that they thought was only confined to the internet, now it's finding its way behind the lecterns of this or that school board representative, this or that county commissioner, this or that city councilman, this or that mayor. While Eric Adams is busy making sure the white supremacists see that his bona fides are absolutely solid, holding up one of the patriarchs of anti-black racism, we got a little something in mind for the Eric Adams of the world. We get our political ducks in a row, we can go ahead and give Eric Adams and the rest of these bootlicks the reverse of Robert Moses. Weaponize our political infrastructure. We've long been planning the road to black empowerment, and we're going to use it to demolish all of these bootlicks. Good day, and be one.